The sun hung low over the Wyoming plains, painting the sky in hues of amber and crimson. Silas McCrae leaned against the weathered fence of his ranch, his calloused hands gripping a chipped mug of black coffee. At 42, Silas was a man carved from the land itself, broad-shouldered, with a face etched by years of wind and worry. His ranch, the Double Bar M, was all he had left after the fever took his parents and the bank took half his dreams. Loneliness was a constant companion, heavier than the winter snows. Silas wasn't one for town gossip, but even he'd heard the whispers about the new arrival in Dusty Hollow. A woman, they said, with city manners and a past she didn't share. Her name was Clara Beaumont, and she'd taken up residence in the old Miller place, a crumbling house on the edge of town. Folks speculated she was running from something, a broken heart, a bad marriage, or worse. Silas didn't care much for speculation. He had cattle to tend and debts to pay. But fate, or maybe just bad luck, had other plans. It was a crisp September morning when Silas rode into Dusty Hollow for supplies. His horse, a sturdy bay named Rusty, snorted as they passed the general store. Inside, the air smelled of molasses and leather. Old man Jenkins, the storekeeper, was haggling with a customer over a sack of flour. Silas grabbed what he needed: coffee, beans, a spool of wire, and headed for the counter. That's when he saw her. Clara Beaumont stood near the shelves, her auburn hair catching the light filtering through the dusty windows. She wore a simple calico dress, but there was something about her, maybe the way her fingers lingered on a bolt of blue fabric, or the quiet defiance in her green eyes, that made Silas pause. She glanced up, and their eyes met for a fleeting moment before she looked away. "Silas McCrae," Jenkins called, breaking the spell. "You settlin' up or daydreamin'?" Silas grunted, tossing 3 crumpled dollar bills onto the counter. "Settle it." As Jenkins tallied the goods, Clara approached, clutching a small tin of tea. "Excuse me," she said, her voice soft but steady. "I don't have enough for this today. Could you hold it for me?" Jenkins scratched his beard. "Ain't a charity, Miss Beaumont. $3 for the tea, or it stays on the shelf." Silas watched her shoulders tense, her fingers tightening around the tin. $3. He knew that kind of money could mean a week's worth of meals for someone like her, someone starting over. Without thinking, he reached into his pocket, pulled out another $3, his last, and slid them across the counter. "For her tea," he said gruffly, avoiding her gaze. Clara's eyes widened. "You don't have to. It's done." Silas cut her off, grabbing his sack and heading for the door. He didn't look back, but he felt her stare burning into him as he mounted Rusty and rode off. That evening, as Silas repaired a fence under the fading light, he heard hoofbeats. He looked up to see Clara riding a borrowed mare, her dress dusted with trail dirt. She dismounted with a grace that didn't belong in Dusty Hollow. "Mr. McCrae," she said, holding out a small bundle wrapped in cloth. "I came to repay you." Silas wiped sweat from his brow, squinting at her. "Ain't necessary. It is to me." She stepped closer, offering the bundle. Inside was a loaf of fresh baked bread and a jar of preserves. "I don't take charity." He took the bundle, their fingers brushing for a moment. "Wasn't charity. Just neighborly." Her lips curved into a small smile, the first he'd seen. "Then consider this neighborly, too." They stood in silence, the wind whispering through the sagebrush. Silas didn't know what to say, so he nodded toward the horizon. "You ride all the way out here alone?" "I'm not afraid of a little dust," she replied, her tone carrying a hint of challenge. He chuckled, surprising himself. "Fair enough." Over the next few weeks, Clara became a fixture in Silas's quiet life. She'd show up unannounced, sometimes with a basket of biscuits, other times with a question about fixing a leaky roof or tending a garden. Silas, gruff as he was, found himself looking forward to her visits. She had a way of filling the silence without crowding it, a rare gift in a place where words were often as scarce as rain. One evening, as they sat on his porch watching the stars, Clara told him her story. She'd been a schoolteacher in Chicago, engaged to a man who promised her the world. But the world turned out to be lies, debts, betrayal, and a scandal that left her reputation in tatters. She'd come to Dusty Hollow to start over, to find a place where her past couldn't follow. Silas listened, his heart aching in a way he hadn't felt since he was a boy. "Folks here don't care much for the past," he said. "They judge you by what you do, not what you ran from." Her eyes glistened in the moonlight. "And what do you think of me, Silas McRae?" He hesitated, his throat tight. "I think you're stronger than you know." Their bond grew slowly, like a seedling pushing through hard earth. Silas taught Clara how to mend fences and brand cattle. She taught him how to laugh again, how to see beauty in the small things, a wildflower blooming in the dust, a hawk circling above the mesa. They were cautious, both scarred by their own histories, but there was an undeniable pull between them. One day, Clara arrived with a letter in her hand, her face pale. "It's from Chicago," she said, her voice trembling. "My fiancé, ex-fiancé, is coming. He says he wants to make things right." Silas felt a knot tighten in his chest. "What do you want?" She shook her head, tears welling. "I don't know. I thought I was done with him, with all of it. But what if he's changed?" Silas wanted to tell her to send the man packing, to stay here where she belonged. But he'd learned long ago that you can't hold on to someone who's already looking back. "You gotta decide for yourself, Clara. Ain't nobody can do that for you." The man arrived a week later, stepping off the stagecoach in a tailored suit that screamed city money. His name was Everett Langston, and he carried himself like he owned the world. Silas watched from a distance as Everett swept into town, charming the locals with his easy smile and smooth words. Clara met him at the boarding house, and Silas saw the way her shoulders stiffened, the way her eyes flickered with doubt. For days, Silas kept his distance, throwing himself into work to drown out the ache. He told himself it was her choice, that he had no claim on her. But every night, as he sat alone on his porch, the emptiness clawed at him. Then came the twist. It was late afternoon when Clara rode up to the ranch, her face flushed with urgency. "Silas, I need your help." He dropped the axe he'd been using to split firewood. "What's wrong?" "It's Everett. He's not here to make things right. He's after the land, the Miller place. He thinks there's oil under it, and he's got papers to claim it. Says I owe him for debts he covered back in Chicago." Silas's jaw tightened. "You don't owe him nothin'. I know that now," she said, her voice fierce. "But he's got a lawyer and forged documents. He's saying I signed the land over to him before I left." "Silas, I didn't. I swear it." Silas didn't hesitate. "We'll fix this." They rode into town together, Silas's rifle slung across his back. At the boarding house, Everett was holding court, spinning tales of his grand plans for Dusty Hollow. When he saw Clara with Silas, his smile faltered. "Clara, darling," Everett said, his voice dripping with false warmth. "You don't need to drag this rancher into our business. He's more than you'll ever be," Clara snapped, her eyes blazing. "Tell him, Silas." Silas stepped forward, his presence steady as stone. "You got no claim here, Langston. Those papers are fake, and we both know it. Leave, or I'll make sure the sheriff takes a long look at your story." Everett laughed, but there was a nervous edge to it. "You think you can scare me, cowboy? I've got men coming. Men who'll make sure this town knows who's in charge." Silas didn't flinch. "Try it." The room went quiet, the air thick with tension. Then Clara spoke, her voice cutting through the silence. "I found the original deed, Everett. It's in my name, clear as day. You can't forge your way out of this." Everett's face twisted, but before he could respond, the sheriff stepped through the door, alerted by a townsfolk who'd overheard the commotion. The forged papers crumbled under scrutiny, and Everett was escorted out of town, his threats fading into the dust. That night, Silas and Clara sat on his porch, the stars brighter than ever. She leaned against him, her head resting on his shoulder. "I was wrong about you," she said softly. "I thought you were just a lonely rancher. But you're home." Silas's heart swelled, but the ache lingered. "And you're sure this is what you want? This life ain't easy, Clara." She looked up at him, her eyes steady. "It's not about easy. It's about real." He took her hand, his rough fingers entwining with hers. "Then stay." The twist wasn't just Everett's scheme. It was the realization that Silas, who'd spent years guarding his heart, had found something worth risking it for. The $3 deal for a tin of tea had bought more than Clara's gratitude. It had bought them both a chance at something neither had dared hope for: love. But love in the West was never simple. Months later, as winter closed in, Clara fell ill. The doctor called it consumption, a cruel echo of the fever that had taken Silas's parents. He sat by her bedside, holding her hand as she faded, her smile still defiant even in weakness. "Promise me," she whispered, her voice barely a breath, "you'll keep this place alive. For us." Silas nodded, his throat too tight for words. When she was gone, he buried her beneath the cottonwood tree where they'd first shared a laugh, her grave marked with a stone he carved himself. The ranch went on, as did Silas, but it was never the same. The townsfolk spoke of the lonely rancher who'd loved and lost, and how a $3 deal had changed everything. And though Silas never spoke of it, he carried Clara's memory in every sunrise, every fence he mended, every star that lit the Wyoming sky.